All right, my introduction to unit circles. That's Led Zeppelin, Kashmir. So what I'm going to teach you is how to come up with all these numbers on the unit circle, because in a trigonometry class, we want you to understand all the connections. I don't want you to use that unit circle. We want you to create it. So to begin with, what we're going to do is just kind of go through one by one and just kind of look at some of the special points on here. So the first thing is, of course, a unit circle has a radius of 1 to it. So if you have a radius that's equal to 1, then you can figure out these basic points around there pretty easily. This point right here, of course, has to be the point 1, 0, okay, because it's over 1 unit. This point here at 90 degrees has to be the point 0, 1. For the same reason, it's up 1. This point over here is negative 1, 0. It's to the left 1, so we got to use a negative value. And then this point down here is the point 0, negative 1. All right, so that'll take care of those points that fall right on the axis. Now what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to zoom in on this thing a little bit, and we're going to create the points that are in the upper quadrants like this. So what I'm kind of interested in showing you how to do is how to find this point, and this point, because once you find that point, the rest of it turns out to be real simple. Okay, so the way I kind of look at this is x values get bigger if you're going from left to right. So as we're going in this direction, those x values are going to get bigger. All right, so the idea is if I go to these points now, I'm just going to count by 1. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, like that. Very simple. Now, y values in this quadrant get bigger if you're just moving upwards. So we're going to do kind of the same thing here. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, like that. Real simple. Now, the other thing that you want to remember is all these points are fractional values. They have to be fractional values because the biggest value you're ever going to hit on the unit circle is 1. So these points are less than 1. Every one of them are. So what we're going to do is going to divide by 2. Okay? And the way that goes on the unit circle, it's pretty easy to remember that all these points that are inside of the quadrants have a fraction of 2. Then the other thing to remember is you have square roots on the numerator. So I'm going to take square root of 3, square root of 2, square root of 2, square root of 3. I'm not going to bother doing the square root of 1 because that's 1 anyway. So just by doing that, so you've already got those points. Now, once you get those points, then it's real simple actually to go through and move these points over here. So if I take this point and move it there, well, the y value is going to stay the same because it's still up the same amount, but now the x value is negative because of the quadrant you're in. Okay, same thing with this point. If you move this point over here, the y value stays the same, so that's going to be square root of 2 over 2. This is going to now be negative square root of 2 over 2 like that. And then we can move this point over like this. Same thing, same y value. X value just goes to negative. So we got negative square root of 3 over 2 like that. Okay, and see that takes care of those points, so it's actually a real simple thing to do to get those points put together like this, and then we just need to do the same thing for those points that are down in the lower quadrants. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go down here and just kind of reason these points out here like by doing basically the same logic. Okay, so really we've already got all the points down. Now if you're in quadrant 4 like you are here, x is positive and y is negative. Okay, so what's going to happen here is again the x values get bigger as you're going from left to right. So you can use the same logic on these points right here. You can say, okay, that's got to be a 1, that's got to be a 2, that's got to be a 3, because they're getting bigger. Okay, then the y values, which are negative, are going to kind of get bigger this way. So by the same logic, now we're disregarding the negatives, so we're just going to go 1, 2, 3, like this. Now everything is divided by 2. It's all fractional values, so you do that. Then you remember that there's square roots in the numerators. Don't bother, of course, with the square root of 1. So now you got that. And then, since you're in this quadrant, y values are negative like that. And then it just becomes a matter of switching these points over like this. So this point is going to have exactly the same y value. The x value is just going to be negative, because now if you're in quadrant 3, you have a negative x and you have a negative y. And if you take this point and move this over like this, so that point's going to move over here. Again, you're going to have exactly the same y value, but the x value is now negative because of where you are in this. Okay, so that's negative square root of 2 over 2. And then this last point right here, come on, behave, pen. This point right here moves over here. So you're going to have the same y value. And then we're going to have just a negative x value like that. So what I've done, see, is I've got all the points just by a little bit of simple logic and knowledge of the relationship that exists on those points. Okay, so that's going to take care of all those things. Now we're going to focus on the angles. Now, just to make this a little easier, I'm going to erase all these points so you can see how I do the angles now. So let's get all this wiped out here for a minute. And when we do the angles, usually students don't have any trouble with the degree measure, but they do oftentimes with the radian measure. And a lot of times I see students, when they create this thing, they change every degree measure to radians one by multiplying by pi over 180. That's kind of a waste of time, because these things have nice, sensible patterns that are fairly easy to remember. Okay, so that's what I'm going to focus on, is how to do those. Okay, well, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around this unit circle in degrees, and we're going to go by 45. So we're going to get 0, then 45, and then 90, and so forth. So I'm just going to focus on counting these things out first of all. Then we'll go back and then get the rest of them the same way. So we're just going to focus just on these for a minute right here. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill in the degree measures on these things, because what I'm doing is, of course, counting by 45s. So if I start here on this, of course, that's going to be 0 degrees. And then this is going to go to 45 degrees. And then this is going to go to 90 degrees. So what I'm doing, and you can do this in your head, I'm just kind of adding 45 each time. So 90 plus 45 is 135. And then you should know that 180 degrees is halfway around the circle. Then 180 plus 45 is 225. 225 plus 45 is 270. And then 270 plus 45 is going to be 315 degrees like that. Okay, so what you'll have basically is all those things kind of marked off now in terms of degrees. Now what you're going to do now is you want to just look at the pattern that exists on these things now. So if I now go with my radian measure here, which is what I'm going to do next, let's just kind of focus totally with 45 degrees for a minute. So if you forget, well, all you got to do is just multiply this by pi over 180. And if you do that, 45 divides in itself one time, 180 divided by 45 is 4, so you get pi over 4. So what I'm going to do on this is I'm going to just count by pi over 4s as I go through this, and then we can kind of reduce the fractions as we go through and do this. So watch carefully how this works now. Okay, so I'm going to start here. I know that that's going to be pi over 4 radians. Now if I go to the next one, now I know that's going to be 2 pi over 4. Okay, and then I'm going to go to 3 pi over 4. Then I'm going to go to 4 pi over 4, and I'm just going to keep counting around that circle like this. So this next one is 5 pi over 4. Okay, then 6 pi over 4. And then 7 pi over 4. Now really I'm all the way back to 8 pi over 4, like that. So now if I go through and just reduce these fractions, if I do this, of course 2 pi over 4 really just reduces to pi over 2, and you can do that in your head as you're counting. 3 pi over 4 is already reduced. Notice at 4 pi over 4, the 4's cross out, so that's pi, and that's good to know that pi radians is 180 degrees. Then 5 pi over 4, of course, is already reduced. 6 pi over 4 reduces down to 3 pi over 2. Okay, then 7 pi over 4 is already reduced. And then you end up with 8 pi over 4. 8 over 4 is 2, so now you're back to 2 pi, like that. So see, that's what you do to get those angles, is just do that then. And then that leaves us with figuring out the radian measure, basically, of the rest of these things. So now we're going to focus on kind of looking at 30-degree increments next, like this. So what I'm going to do on this, I'm going to take my highlighter, and what I'm going to do is just kind of go around. And I'm going to start with the 30-degree angle like this, and I'm just going to get this kind of taken care of. So let's focus on that. And then we're going to go to 60, and then we're going to go to 90, and we're just jumping by 30-degree values like this. And we're going to jump around and just sort of count those things out like this, counting by 30s. Now some of these things, of course, we already got done. So we'll go ahead and get these done, and then we should be able to see a simple pattern on these two as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is let's just kind of do these by degrees, and you're just going to go through and add in your head. So that's 30 degrees, of course, there. 60, 90 we already have, 120, 150, 180, we've already written that down. 180 plus 30 is 210. 210 plus 30 is 240. 240 plus 30 is 270. 270 plus 30 is 300. 300 plus 30 is 330. So you can just kind of count those things out. Now what I'm going to do next here is let's just kind of think about how these things go. So if we start with 30 degrees like this, and convert that, you can always convert that if you need to. So let's start with 30 degrees, just kind of at the side here, and let's do a conversion on this. Okay, so we got 30 degrees, which could be multiplied by pi over 180 if you needed to. Okay, and of course what happens on that is come on, pen, cooperate. Okay, so if I got 30 pi over 180, zeros cross out, that reduces down to pi over 6. So what I'm going to do now is I go through the rest of this unit circle, you're going to see me just going through, writing these things out, and then reducing the fractions as I need to. So that's pi over 6. If you go to the next place, that's going to be 2 pi over 6. Then this is going to be 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6, I just keep counting. 5 pi over 6, now that's already reduced, so I'm going to write that in the blank. Then 6 pi over 6, keep going. 7 pi over 6, that's reduced, so that's done. 8 pi over 6 will be the next one. 9 pi over 6. 10 pi over 6. And finally we make it all the way over to 11 pi over 6. So now all I got to do on this is I need to just go through and I need to just reduce these fractions and I'm done. Okay, so if I go up here, if I look at 2 pi over 6, that fraction is going to reduce to pi over 3. So we record that. Notice that 2 pi over 4 reduces to pi over 2. 4 pi over 6 reduces to 2 pi over 3. So we've got that. 5 pi over 6 we're already done with. 6 pi over 6, notice that reduces to pi, which we already got and should already know. We already got 7 pi over 6, so that's done. 8 pi over 6, 8 6 reduces to 4/3, so that's 4 pi over 3. And then when you get to 9 pi over 6, that reduces to 3 pi over 2, which we already have. And then 10 pi over 6 reduces down to 5 pi over 3. So we got that. And then 11 pi over 6 we're done with. So see, it's real easy patterns that you can find on this unit circle when you do this then. So now we've got all the angles put together and I've shown you how to do all those sides. And that'll take care of your unit circle. So it's real simple patterns. Just study this. Take a unit circle a couple of times and see if you can get everything put together. And hopefully this lesson will help you to create a unit circle, because you'll need to do that throughout the class. Thanks for watching.